Welcome, everybody, to Illuminate, Navigate, Radiate, Journey of Emotional Resilience. I'm your host, Brandon, and this is our third episode of our grief series. Fortunately, Lou had a passing in her family, so she will not be here for this episode, but she will definitely be back next week, which we will be looking forward to having her back. So this episode, I'll just kind of be talking a little bit about, supporting somebody else through that grieving process. We've already talked about kind of just what grief looks like, the basic understanding of it, or what it could look like, because it's such a, it's a unique process to each and every one of us. It looks a little bit different, it can last varying amounts of times, it can go away, pop back up. There's just so many layers to grief. And then we talked about the impact on mental health, how it can trigger some things, how it can, make things seem a little bit worse, or, make those times harder when we're dealing with mental health and having grief or processing grief at that same time. And like I said, today it's going to be more about other people, other people's grieving process that we want to be able to support, right? If we have friends, we have family, we have just people we care about, going through that grieving process, we want to be able to support them in a lot of different ways. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. And I think the big one to just kind of start off with is being there, right? Just being there for somebody in that time, being, somebody that they can, lean on, they can talk to, they can just feel comfortable, safe, and calm around. Because when we're grieving, when we're going through loss, we don't know what it's going to be like, right? When we're dealing with the grief of, losing something really important or someone really important, we're not sure what our life's going to look like on the other side. In those moments, especially those early stages, there's a lot of unknown. There's a lot of adjustment. There's a lot of just kind of figuring things out. And so to be able to be there for somebody is so big. To be able to just be an active listener. You don't even have to say a whole lot. You don't have to give a whole lot of input. You don't have to say a lot of words to try to make things better or make things right, because we all know sometimes those words don't do anything. Those when you lose somebody really close to you, having somebody say, oh, they're in a better place, or, it'll get better over time. You just don't want to hear that, right? You're dealing with a huge loss. You don't want to hear that things are going to be better right now. You don't want to hear that they're off in a better place, as opposed to being there with you right now, because that seems like the best place for them to be. So avoiding some of those things and just being able to be there and listen to them, be that shoulder for them to lean on, can be probably the biggest support that you can give somebody while they're grieving. And then you want to be able to offer support, right? You want to be able to, as you're that ear, and you're that shoulder for them, you want to be able to actually try to support them in some way. And that can come in both practical ways and emotional ways. Some practical ways like cooking dinner, running errands, doing some things that they just, they have to get done is big, and it's important, because when you take care of those things, when that's one less thing for that person to worry about, then they can spend more time in that process. They can spend more focus on, getting some of the things they might have to be getting done that revolves around that grief, around that loss. And so when we can do those practical things, when we can take care of, what may seem like those small things, may even seem, insignificant in the big picture of things, but that little small task that you do for somebody can make a big difference. This small little task you do for somebody can take away from them having to worry about it, them having to stress about it, them having to put time that they want to put into, their grief process into that. So when you're able to do some of those small practical things, some of those maybe daily routines or chores types of things, and take that load off that person, that's a great way to do that. And then some emotional support, right? Being able to be there is a huge one. Just being able to listen to somebody, being able to be there for them to talk, is huge. But you can offer, finding them some professional help as well. Maybe they're really struggling to, process. Maybe they're really struggling to get out of bed and just get through, the daily things that they have to get through. Maybe they're, that feeling of hopelessness and that feeling of despair is lasting a longer period of time. It's starting to prevent some of those those, things that they have to get back to. And so be able to offer, helping them find emotional support or professional help in those moments is really important as well. You don't want to, sit there and say, well, you need this, you have to do this, but to be able to bring that across in a calm and respectful manner and say, hey, maybe this could be an option. Hey, maybe we can look into this. If there's something that you think could help, I think could be a really big thing, because sometimes we need support in finding, professional help. We don't always know where to look. We don't always know how to look. And then when we're already in a bad place ourselves, it's a lot harder to go out and find that yourself. So offering help in that process of finding professional support, of finding professional help like that can be a huge deal for somebody. I think another big way to go through that grieving process, to support that grieving process with somebody, is also to share those memories, right? To talk about those positive things about those people, to share those things that is uplifting about that. I think that can be a really huge one. At least for me, that's always a really big one, to be able to look back and some of those memories and some of those good times of the people I've lost. I remember when my uncle died, and all the cousins were together, and we were just talking about some some of those good moments that our uncle gave us. He was a funny one. He was the little bit of an outrageous guy, but he was a special guy. And sharing some of those moments, sharing some of those memories made that process a little bit easier. We were laughing, we were having fun, we were really sharing the joy that he brought us, and we were doing that at his funeral because that was the biggest thing he gave us. He gave us a lot of laughs, a lot of joy. So I think sharing those memories with people can be really huge for them. And there's obviously probably always a time for that. There's always a chance it's going to get more emotional, after you think about that. When you think about those good times, when you think about those positive memories, you kind of realize you're not going to have it anymore. And that's a really hard thing to accept. It's a really hard thing to go through. I even almost feel myself struggling with just saying that right now. But you don't get those anymore. You don't get those memories. So understanding the timing of those and the fact that it may be hard for that person in that moment is something to respect as well. And, just speaking off that respecting part, respecting somebody's process. Grief is such a hard thing. Grief is such a tough thing to process and to go through. And it's hard to even understand it. It's hard to grasp, that the concept of loss and the concept of grief, and to put it into words. And so to respect somebody's process in that, how they're going to go through it, the timing that they're going to go through it, maybe the different stages that they're going to hit in a different order, or one they're going to feel a little bit stronger than another, like understanding and just respecting that process, not trying to force anything, not trying to push anything. Be there as they go through one stage to the next, and respecting that they're going to feel that in their own way, just like you probably would in your own way. And that comes with patience. That comes with being able to take a breath yourself, right? Sometimes we want people to be better for different reasons, right? If your spouse is going through something, if your parents are going through something, if your children are going through something, you want them to feel better. It hurts to see the people you love in pain. So you almost just want to say, move on, get past it. Look at the other things you have in your life. You almost want to say that because, it's not to disrespect them. It's not to disrespect their process, but it's because you don't want to see them that way. And understanding that, to take that off of you a little bit and to be patient with them. Let them find their way to bring happiness again. Let them, have their way through the anger, through the bargaining, through the the depression part of it. Like, let them feel those stages, because that's so important to everybody. And then to understand, like, it's gonna come up again, right? To be patient in those moments. Could be a year later, could be 6 months later, could be 5 years later, and something may happen. Maybe it's an anniversary, maybe it's a date, maybe a song comes on the radio, maybe somebody says something, or maybe just a moment in life happens where they wish that person was there to experience that moment with them. Being patient in those moments is so huge, to be understanding in that moment where, maybe it's a milestone, maybe you're accomplishing something and you just wish, that family member or that friend was there to experience that with you, to be there with you, to see the growth in you. And you just want them to be there. And obviously they can't be. And so to be patient with somebody, like, because it might be a really good moment, it might be a really special moment, and maybe they're just not ready to feel it that way. So to be patient in those times can be super, super important as well, to let somebody grieve in that moment. And then as that time goes on, you want to be checking in with them as well, right? You want to be checking in on maybe those anniversaries, on maybe those milestones, and seeing where they're at, seeing how they're doing. Because sometimes somebody needs that as well. Somebody needs to say like, "Hey, how are you doing with this? I know this date is really important. I know this, anniversary is coming up. Like, what can we do to make that a little bit easier? What can we do to make that a special memory?" Right? Maybe you can go to, a special site. Maybe you can go somewhere that meant a lot, and you can do something to remember that person. I think that can be a really powerful thing. I know, going to the grave site of certain people has been a really big process for me. I took a letter to one, read it out loud to where my friend was buried, and doing that was a really big healing process for me. It took some time to be able to go there, to be able to see that. But once I was able to do that, and that came with encouragement. That came with encouragement from other people telling me like, "Hey, this could be something really important for you. This could be something that's, a huge part of your healing process. Like, you should definitely go and try to do that." And so that encouragement was a really big part of it, which I think we can always encourage people to do some of these positive things. But it was a really tough moment. It was a really tough moment to go there, to read that out loud, to see their name on a headstone. That stuff is hard. And so to be encouraging in those moments, to check in on those moments, can really be big for that person you're checking in with, and encouraging. As somebody's going through the grieving process, through all the things that I just mentioned, I just talked about, I'm sure you've done a lot of them. I'm sure there's even more, that we could throw in there. There's even more that, different ideas or different things we've done or tried and found out they work or didn't work. There's so much we can do. But as you do those things, as you go through those processes, really creating that safe space for somebody is the most important thing. Right? Grief is hard, and the loss of somebody we love, somebody important to us, somebody that meant something to us, can be one of the most difficult things in life to go through. That can be the hardest thing to cope with in life, to deal with in life. And so to create a safe space for somebody to go through that, for somebody to experience that, is vital in being able to support them. I look at some of the different things, as different challenges I face in my life. I know I've talked about it in this series already, but the loss of my friend is up there with the hardest. The circumstances that surrounded it, the way it happens, the timing, just everything. It makes it a really hard loss to still accept. Going on 12 years later, it's a really hard thing for me to, still understand. And so when people, check in with me, even if I say I don't want to talk about it, even if I say I don't want to, I don't want to bring it up, when people check in on me and people encourage me to talk about that or share about that, that's a really powerful thing for me. And so I think when we do that, and they create those spaces for me to do that in, and create those safe spaces for me to do that in, that really helps with my healing process. That really helps with the grief, and the pain, the anger I feel from that loss. And so I think when we can do that for others around us, for those people in our lives that are important to us, for those people in our lives that we love, or just for those people in our lives, we just want to help through a really tough time, to an unimaginable time, to a time where words can't fix anything. They can't make anything better. But us being there, us creating that safe space, us creating that support and being that support can make all the difference in the world to somebody. And so, be patient, be kind, be compassionate. If you have a friend or family member or somebody around you that is experiencing loss, experiencing grief, you know, think about how tough that is. And remember to think about the fact that we process those things differently, and to respect their process and their feelings surrounding that loss, or that you know that grieving process. Understanding that, respecting that, super important, and something to always keep in mind. I don't feel grief the same way you do, right? I don't feel depression the same way you do. I don't feel anxiety the same way you do. We all feel these things a little bit different. We all have our own way of handling these things. We all have our own process of getting through those things. And so to be able to respect that in somebody else and not want them to do it on your time um, is big to remember. Being able to give that safe space, be able to give that listening ear, be able to give that encouragement and that respect to them can all at least make it a little bit easier as we deal with some of those big losses in our life, and as we deal with some of those painful moments that we go through in life. So I encourage you all, if you got somebody going through that, be there for them, listen to them, create that safe space for them, because that will make all the difference in the world. It'll have a huge impact, maybe not in that moment, but further on down the line, when they can look back and saw that you were there for them in that moment, that all you did was sat there and listen, that all you did was hug them. Uh, that leaves a huge impact on people in life. So do it. Be there for people as we go through these painful steps in our lives. So thank you for joining me. Again, we'll be back with our final episode next week. Lou will be returning and will be joining us for that final episode. And we're just going to kind of talk to that healing process and what those next steps kind of look like as we try to move on from loss and be able to continue with our lives, even though it can even though it can be the hardest thing, and it can be something that you don't want to do in that moment. It's something that unfortunately, we have to keep trying. We have to keep going um, as we process grief. So thank you for joining me. It's been Illuminate, Navigate, Radiate. Have a great rest of your day.